Welcome to Real World, Real Faith, the podcast where we explore the intersection of faith and the workplace. Hi, I'm your host, Andrew Cole, and in each episode, we'll be sitting down with inspiring individuals who bring their Christian faith into their professional lives. We'll be diving deep into their stories, their challenges, and of course, their triumphs, and discover how faith shapes their journey. Join us as we learn how to live out our beliefs in every aspect of our lives, one real story at a time. Today, we are joined by a good friend of mine, Brandon Fusco. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. So, to kind of get us started today, can you kind of introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Like you said, my name is Brandon Fusco. I am 33 years old. I live here in Hannibal. I work for a behavioral health company. I've been doing this, working in this field for, I think going on 10 years now. Not at this specific job, but other jobs very close like this. So, really big in the behavioral health field. Yeah. What else? What else do you think they'd be interested in knowing?
Fair enough. But no, I'm super happy that you've decided to come on the podcast today. To get us into things, can you share a little bit about your professional background and what your current role is?
Yeah, sure. So, professional background actually goes back pretty far. I have been working with behavioral health stuff for going on professionally in behavioral health, going on, I think around 8 to 10 years, somewhere in that ballpark. I got my degree at HLG, graduated in the winter of 2017, started my first job into professionally behavioral health later in 2018, working for Division of Youth Services, which is essentially, it is not juvie, it is a rehabilitation program that Missouri has for youth or troubled youth. It helps them work through a program, learn to deal with emotions, learn how to navigate difficult environments that they are currently dealing with at home, communication skills, coping skills, that sort of thing. And got promoted to be a group leader. So I was kind of leading a team, working with youth on that side of things. Left around the time COVID hit and started working for Compass Health Network, which I did community support specialist, which is instead of being in a group home like DYS was, because that was a facility type job. Instead of working there, I was then going out into the community, meeting with them at home with their parents, meeting with them at school, that sort of thing. Left there in 2023, did a short, brief time with Children's Division, realized was not a fan of that because it was kind of more focused on gathering information and holding people accountable for what was going on, which is important. It just was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then left that pretty quickly when I got a job offer up here in Hannibal at Mark Twain Behavioral Health. And I have been here ever since.
In what ways does your faith influence your day-to-day work?
My job and working in the behavioral health field is it is a bit of a tricky scenario dealing with your faith in the field. The way that I describe it to people is, my job as a community support specialist, which is my current title, is I am a behavioral health professional. I am not a therapist, but there is some counseling involved. I help connect people to resources. I help get people making sure that they're getting to appointments if that's what they need. I help make sure that they are getting the medications that they need. They're getting them picked up. They're taking them regularly, applying skills that maybe they learned in therapy, different things like that. So just kind of generally providing support, hence the community support specialist, just in what they need from day-to-day life, whether it be getting to resources, connecting to resources for food, connecting to resources for financial assistance for things, helping them find work, that sort of stuff. With that being said, my faith influences me very strongly in my desire to do this job, just because of the fact that a little bit of my background, I grew up not necessarily poor, but we did not have money. We were not well off. We grew up in an area where there were not a lot of resources available for the things that me, along with a few other members of my family, needed for struggles that we were having. And it led to some pretty difficult times. And personally, it led to ending up in some scenarios that were really hard to manage. And really the only time that I started to see things a little more clearly was when I got involved with church, and I decided, I don't even really remember when, but at one point I decided that I wanted to be that resource or be that help to the people struggling in the dark, kind of be that person that goes and meets them where they're at in their darkness and helps pull them out of it, and kind of gives that unconditional love that Jesus exemplifies. And I felt that there's no better way in my eyes to show the love of Christ than to show somebody unconditional support. Be there for them in their darkest moment, be there for them in moments where they are not saying the nicest things, they are not acting like the nicest people, they are not presenting themselves in their best light. And so not leaving them, not walking away from them in that moment, but being there to say, "Hey, I understand that these emotions, these things that you're dealing with, this stress is not you. It is not what you are. It is just what you are currently going through." So that's kind of how it influences me on a day to day. It helps me stay grounded when conflicts inevitably happen, because when you deal with people who are struggling with the things that they are struggling with in my line of work, whether it be just looking for work, financial needs, some people deal with, they're going through rehab, they're recovering from alcoholism, you deal with a lot of the dark and ugly, and it's really easy to walk away from that because it can be kind of justified, like when somebody struggles, it it can be justified to walk away from them. And so my faith is influences it by reminding myself that, like, in my darkest moment, Christ didn't walk away from me, and I want to do that for other people. And so whether that means being the harsh voice that has to kind of bring them to a moment of reality through specific communication styles or whatever, or being the shoulder they need to vent to, whatever it is. Like, I want to be that.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, and I think yeah, that is, very Christ-like, and that's awesome, man. Can you talk about a specific challenge that you faced at work and how your faith guided you through it?
I mean, there's, I kind of hinted at it, in my line of work, there's a lot of high emotions. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of really difficult things that you have to deal with on a day to day. People getting pretty upset with you just on a regular basis. When you are somebody's community support specialist, clients don't really understand what that means. You're dealing with a lot of people with a lot of mental disorders, and so you have to be very careful about how you communicate. You have to be very careful about how you bring things to light that they need to work on, so that it doesn't come off as accusatory or judgmental, but they understand that it is their responsibility. And that can be hard because you're asking them to change their mindset and turn it inwardly on themselves, and not necessarily blame themselves, but kind of take that accountability. And that can be really hard to get some people to understand that. Um, and I think the other struggle that I have is just the fact that I'm working in behavioral health. There are certain rules of conduct, there are certain policies in place, there are things that, I cannot, like, we are a mental health organization. We are not a Christian mental health organization. So, unfortunately, I cannot have most of my conversations be something that ties back to the gospel. Like, I cannot directly do that. Now, if they ask me, then, gloves are off. I can talk about it, and I can dig into it and witness to them for our entire meeting that day. Um, but otherwise, it's just not something I can bring up. And that's really hard when you're dealing with people who are really struggling with finding their place in the world, and finding what to put their hope and their trust in, and knowing what the ultimate answer to that is, and not being able to say it to them, not being able to tell them, "Hey, what if we tried getting to church? What if we tried reading the Bible? Have you even heard about Jesus? Do you even know who he is? Have you tried this sort of thing? So that's really difficult. So navigating high emotions without the strongest asset in my toolbox day to day is really difficult. And it can leave you feeling really drained, knowing that you are having to answer worldly problems with worldly solutions and knowing that those just don't work a lot of times. Like they fall apart, they're temporary things. And so that would probably be the biggest struggle I have just on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I think my faith has guided me through it probably just by understanding and learning to accept that, like people have said before, being that image.
Hmm.
I can be an image of unconditional love and support without mentioning a single thing about Jesus. But I am actively trying to live the situation out and live in a way and support them in a way that is by Christ's example. And so I think that would be the second part of that question of how my faith kind of guides me through it, of just knowing that they can't do anything about the way that I act.
To kind of build off of that, how do you balance those professional expectations with your personal values? I know you kind of talked about it a little bit, but could we dig a little bit deeper into that?
So balancing those professional expectations, yeah, it really just kind of comes down to, like I had said, having to be more focused on what physical and readily available resources are out there. Now, the plus side is that Hannibal has many churches. Hannibal has many churches, and that is a great thing, because there are a lot of people out there. There are a lot of churches out there that I don't think a lot of people understand how much they do for the community and how much support they offer, because there's such a stigma right now, I think, in certain circles, that people just don't think about it. They don't think to do it. They don't think to go check and just ask the church, a local church, if they have any means of support. But actually, just recently, there is a church here in town that just bought a school that shut down, and they are turning it into housing to help with people with financial crisis, people who are struggling with, like, single mothers who are struggling with keeping, a roof over her and her children's heads. Um, so being able to kind of point them towards certain resources is also a good way um to help kind of balance the fact that I have to focus more on worldly things than I can on, scripture and the gospel. But yeah, so the difficult part is probably that, is just having to kind of keep that balance, and knowing that the other thing is that we live in a world and we live in a society right now where people are really struggling to find their identity in something. And that's what life is all about right now. People's identity is in the disorders that they have. It is in the where they go to school. It is in where they go to church. It is in what social media platform they're active on. It is what celebrities they follow. It's a lot of numerous things like that. Leads to this difficulty in me having to be very careful about certain people even finding out that I'm Christian, because I don't want them to to worry about that. If that makes sense. I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of being a Christian. But if I know that this person has had a negative experience with the church, which unfortunately people have, we are not perfect. The church is not perfect. People have negative experiences all the time. And so you have to be very tactful in how you bring that up, and how some people find that out, and how you share that with certain people in this field. Because again, I cannot just openly say, "Hey, I'm a Christian. This is what I think you should do." But also, sometimes that's just not the way to go about it. Sometimes you have to work towards it, kind of show them the kind of person that you are, allow them to get that image of not yourself, but Christ through you. And then a lot of times it becomes a lot easier to then bridge that gap. But it's something where again, I'm not hiding it because I'm ashamed of it, but it's for them. It's for their sake of trust and stability and that sort of thing. And it's not that, trying to hide it from them to trick them or anything like that. It's just more of a right now, this doesn't need to be the focus. Whatever your identity is, however you identify yourself, whatever you believe about yourself, whatever lifestyle you live, that is not my focus. My focus is getting you stable, is getting you to a place where you can manage life. And so that's the other thing is that it's having to tiptoe that line between wanting to share the gospel with them, but also understanding that in this line of work, I cannot have that be first and foremost. I cannot try to consistently win them over because in this line of work, my job description, my job expectation is to support them in the worldly things that are going on, not in the spiritual battles. If those get brought up, if they ask for those things, if they are spiritual people, I am more than welcome to have those conversations with them. But I cannot make that my foremost goal. And sometimes that can be really hard.
As we kind of bring this to a close, what advice would you give to other Christians trying to live out their faith at work, regardless of the field? What advice would you give?
My advice would be to know that living out your faith is not always through words. Faith without works is dead. But those works don't always have to be actively talking about the gospel. And I know that that sounds really contradictory because we're called to go out and make disciples of all nations, and to do that, at some point you got to talk about it, and that's true. But sometimes just living out the principles and the examples and the lessons that Christ laid out for us, sometimes that is the best thing that you can do. And sometimes we just have to do what Jesus would do and follow the one and be that support, and maybe not win them over with our words, but win them over with our unconditional love. Because I think when you have a situation like that and you are able to see somebody struggling and recognize that they are struggling, recognize that it's not just who they are as a person. That's a whole different thing. That's not even what I'm talking about. But dealing with somebody who is struggling and being there in the midst of their struggle to say, I'm here for you, whatever it is that you need. I just want to help you get through whatever this is. And just being loving towards people. I could dig into this for hours, man, but you don't have that time. I don't have that time. But so just living it out through your actions and doing the hardest thing and forgiving people. Because I cannot tell you how many times I deal with people who are just mean people, but they have good moments. And when I've established myself as a pillar in their life, as a support in their life that isn't going to go anywhere when things get rough, that starts to build trust. And when you build that trust, then you can start to set those boundaries. And so I know that that's really focused on my line of work, but I think that that could go anywhere really.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just live out your faith, live it out in your actions, live it out in your acceptance of struggles, and just love people in their darkest moments. Just love them as best you can.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Brandon, and thank you for coming on the podcast today. It's been awesome having you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's it's always great to be able to told, hey, we want you to come on here and just yap for forever. Because if there's one thing I'm good at, it is talking and talking and talking and talking.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on Real World, Real Faith. I've been your host, Andrew Cole, and I pray today's conversation offered encouragement and clarity as you navigate your own calling in your workplace and in your walk with Christ. As we continue hearing these stories, struggles, and victories of believers living out their faith in everyday life, I hope you are reminded that God is at work in your own story too. If you have questions, need guidance, or would simply like to share what God is doing in your life, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to connect with you. Until next time, May the Lord strengthen you, lead you, and bless you as you live out your faith, one real story at a time.